But first, Harold Pinter, on his play The Homecoming, where he plays Max, the father, Max, the family man. Harold Pinter's now so fated, not least with the Nobel Prize for Literature, that it's hard to remember the bewilderment that greeted early plays such as The Birthday Party. The playwright himself has always been reluctant to sign up to any particular account of his plays. On the other hand, he's quite often acted in them. And not least of the pleasures of this weekend's Radio 3 production of The Homecoming is to hear him play for the first time Max, a man who begins the play trying to goad one of his sons into speech and ends it, defeated, on the floor, asking for a kiss from his daughter-in-law, maybe sexual, maybe not. The Homecoming's the story of a father, Max, his three sons, Lenny and Joey, and Teddy, who returns to the family home with Ruth, his wife. By the end of the play, Teddy leaves to return to the States, while Ruth stays behind in the home, to be sexually shared amongst the men, or so they hope, and to be set up in Soho as a prostitute. I met Harold Pinter just before he recorded the play. There's some strong language later in the interview, but it began by asking him how he prepares as an actor for the role of Max.
I don't. I'm not preparing for it. I just jump in the deep end and find out what's going on in Max, really, but only out of experiencing, actually saying the lines.
How do you know when the lines are right?
When they're right.
How do you know, in other words, when you say a line and you experiment with Max, how do you know you've got him right?
Well, it's a question of smell, isn't it? You smell it. If you got it right, it's a good pong. And if you haven't got it right, it's a bad pong. I mean, I think acting is just instinct and discovery and so on. But once you find something, you've got to stay with it. Once you find that something is indeed right, you have to adhere to it and not move away from it.
When you wrote The Homecoming, you were in your mid-30s, and as I read it this time, I couldn't help but think Max was a kind of the central figure. There's a very long, in effect, monologue at the beginning, and he ends with that. It seems now a kind of wonderfully heroic enterprise for so young a man to have written so eloquently about so old a man. The nearest I could think of it was Tennyson's poem Tithonus, which is another poem by a young man about an endlessly old man. Looking back on it, do you understand why so young you could write about the old so well?
No, I don't really. I mean, I don't know how it came about. I just, one day I simply started with this image of this man, with two men, Max and Lenny, and just went on from there. Then, of course, when you say he's the central figure, in my view, I would say Ruth is the central figure, in actual fact. Because I think they all circle around her. I think she's in the centre, like a magnet, drawing them all towards her, really.
When you say she's the centre of the play, do you think she is the most positive force in the play? Because this is the most brutal play of yours, I think I know.
Well, I've written one or two other brutal plays, I think, which would rival this one. But I think I do believe she is a positive force, yes. And I understand what you mean. There's a lot of death about, really, and destruction in this play. But she doesn't subscribe to any of that. And I find her, by the end of the play, there's been a lot of misunderstanding about this, but I've always found her to be a free woman, a free spirit, an independent person, whereas the others are locked into their fates inextricably. I've always liked her very much. I think she's very unpredictable, and nobody knows quite what to make of her, really. And I certainly think that at the very end, when Max suddenly says she won't be adaptable, I think he's absolutely right. She's not at all adaptable.
And is that why Max at the end is so damn desperate, so humiliated at the end?
Well, he's lost his way, hasn't he? He's literally fallen on his arse and can't get up. And I think she is the dominant force. But that's the last image of the play, I think.
For me, knowing your work as I do, it feels to me like almost everything you knew was put into that play. And after this play, quite a few things shift. Does it seem to you to be a kind of a culmination and an ending and therefore a new beginning?
Well, I'm not sure that I can address that question. I can't make a judgment or analyse my work, and I'm not able to say, really, what was the beginning and what was the end of any passage of time and of work. I've just proceeded going from one thing to another, really. I can't at this moment remember what the next...
It was it in effect was landscape.
Oh, really? Yes.
Rather different.
That's a totally different state of affairs. As a matter of fact, I think it could be said that they do have something in common, those two plays, in that we know what the men are like in The Homecoming, but in Landscape, there's this extremely, finally brutal character in Duff, and a woman who he simply cannot reach. She remains eternally turned away from him. And, as you know, in Landscape, she never looks at him. Now, that's not the same as Ruth, but at the same time, there's something uncatchable about both of them. It seems to me, both women.
Is it fair to say you're adapting The Homecoming for radio? I ask this because there are obvious moments when Ruth moves her legs, which I'm doing now, which are not half as compelling as her movements
are.
Not
quite, no.
Not quite.
Well, firstly, at that moment when she moves her legs, she says so. She actually says, I move my leg. My lips move, and so on and so on. Though she says, I move my leg, but I wear underwear. It captures your attention. So that says it very clearly, I think. And discussing the problems that radio brings for this play, I think we've got a long way towards solving them. Very economically, I think. Quite tersely. But nevertheless, I have added one or two lines which do make certain elements of the play clearer on radio. And it's quite simple, really. Cigar, Teddy?
Thank you.
Lenny?
Thanks.
Sam?
Thank you very much.
That was a very good lunch.
I'm glad you liked it.
Do you know why you've gone back to the theatre as performer like this? I mean, to do Krapp's Last Tape and Max is like taking two of the most difficult roles imaginable.
Yes.
Quite one after another. It seems like an act of sort of heroic masochism.
Well, it certainly wasn't a case of masochism playing Krapp's Last Tape. It was an experience I really relished. I have a feeling I'm going to relish this one also. So, I don't know why I've suddenly come back to acting, but I've been an actor all my life. I mean, that's a hell of a long time now. I've been an actor, approaching 60 years. So, acting is in my blood, and I think I do have a sense of rhythm also. But don't forget, what's interesting about this is that I'm actually acting closely with one of the great actors of our time, Michael Gambon, who is a very old friend of mine. He's done about 4 or 5 of my plays, actually, in the past. We get on terribly well. But I've never acted with him. That's not true. I have. What am I talking about? I acted in Betrayal on radio with him. That was a very enjoyable experience, in fact. But he's grown and grown and grown in stature and power. And I'd be fascinated to know what he's going to do with this. And I'll find out.
And of course, Max and Sam, the brothers, you and Gambon, they're the most at open warfare.
Oh, yes. That's right, open warfare, yes.
Everybody else is in closet
Yes.
warfare, but these two are open.
Yes, Lenny and Teddy are certainly at war, but in a very, very different way. I think Max and Lenny are also at war. So there are going to be a lot of sparks, I think, in the air when we start this.
People often think of great film directors